Hello and welcome to another episode of Square State Sandlot. I am your host, Bill Montoya, and I have joining me again, Raph. Logue may jump in here soon. He was out on a job, so I think he was still planning on coming on, but hasn't got on quite yet. So he may be popping in at a random point at some time to talk about his Panthers. But we have a lot of news to go through, especially in the NFL. A lot of injuries, division standings through 2 weeks, how we're feeling about our teams. Um, I did notice you don't have your 49ers gear on. Ill prepared for this one.
Just a little bit.
That's all right. Raph is graciously joining us from on the road, so you'll have to bear with him not having his 49ers gear on. And then we'll talk a little bit about MLB and what's coming down to an interesting playoff race, especially with that second wild card spot in both leagues. So we'll get to all of that soon, but I do want to remind you to, wherever you're seeing this, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share if you can. We'd appreciate you help getting the news out there and getting us out to your friends and family. Love to have some more interaction. So anything you can do to help us spread the news, we'd appreciate it. So let's go into NFL. So Raph, I don't know how much you've been paying attention to other teams other than your own, but I did want to just quickly go through each division and kind of give the standings as they sit through week 2. And then we'll talk about any surprise teams, any teams that we think maybe should be hitting the panic button, even though it's only 2 weeks in. And then we'll talk about our teams in more depth. So let's just start with the AFC East. You have the Dolphins at 2-0, Jets at 1-1, Bills at 1-1, and Patriots at 0-2. Any surprise teams there for you?
Not really. Not for them.
I think the only team that really surprised me was Bills losing to the Jets on opening day, especially with the Rodgers injury. I thought they should run all over them, but unfortunately, Josh Allen decided to turn the ball over 4 times in that game, and Zach Wilson did just enough to keep them in there along with that stellar defense. So I think that's the only real surprise to me is that the Jets aren't 0-2 and the Bills are not 2-0. Moving on to my Raiders division, and that is the AFC West. They are actually currently sitting atop the division at 1-1 because they have that one in division win against the Broncos. So they're sitting at 1-1. Chiefs are sitting at 1-1, and then the Chargers and the Broncos are at the bottom of the division, sitting at 0-2. So any surprises there for you?
I guess the Chargers a little bit. I would have expected them to be 1-1. Denver's where I think they should be, but
yeah, I think we're on the same page there with the Broncos. Chargers, they easily could be 2-0 if they just had a competent coach, I believe. So I'm hoping Staley will still be around when the Raiders face them. I believe it is in week 5. The Raiders may be the last game he coaches against, or the last team he coaches against if they lose that game. So, Raiders, obviously they barely squeaked by the Broncos in week 1. I think they beat them 17-16 was the final score. Got their butts handed to them by the Bills. So they actually have tied for the worst scoring differential in the entire AFC at -27. They lost by 28 to the Bills. So just the 1-point win against the Broncos brings that to -27, tied with the Texans. So that obviously suggests we ran into a team that's much better than us, and I think that's very accurate. I knew we were going to get the best shot from the Bills after their performance against the Jets, and it was the home opener for them. So nothing really surprised me there. The Chiefs have not looked great. They definitely don't look like the Chiefs yet this year. They obviously played a very close game with the Lions that first game to open the season on Thursday night, and then they had the extended time to get ready for, who did they just play? The Jaguars. And they only beat them, I think it was 17-9. So it's not the high-scoring Chiefs offense that we're used to just yet. I did see that they restructured Patrick Mahomes' contract to give him like $210 million in bonuses right up front to bring him more in line with the rest of the quarterbacks. Basically, they didn't redo the entire contract. They just moved money up from the back end of it. So in 2026, they'll revisit the contract again and probably renegotiate that. I have seen some rumblings that they may be extending Travis Kelce as well to bring him up to more in line where he should be getting paid as the top tight end in the league, where currently he's sitting at like 9. That's not done yet, but there's a lot of rumbling saying it should be done soon. So, and then they obviously just brought back Chris Jones, and I think he had a major impact in that Jaguars game. So Chiefs are not quite hitting their stride yet, but once they face the Raiders defense, I think they'll probably turn things around for the rest of the season. And then, yeah, like you said, Broncos are sitting right where I thought they would be at the end of towards the end of the season. I figured they would be towards the bottom of the division. But the way the Raiders are trending, it's hard to say they won't be right there with them. So right now, Raiders fans, I know we're not feeling great coming off that Bills loss, but if you look at the division standings, we're right there at the top. So I'll go more into the Raiders when we get through all these standings here through week 2. And obviously I'll have more to say about a couple of situations going on with them. But AFC North, you have the Ravens sitting at 2-0. They've had a couple wins, obviously, but I don't think any of them were super convincing. They just beat the Bengals that are really banged up right now. They're struggling to do anything on offense, and I've seen quite a few. In fact, you sent me one of the memes the other day saying Joe Burrow, since he got paid, is essentially Andy Dalton. So a lot of those floating around. I know he re-aggravated that calf injury again, so he may even end up missing some time, and they're already 0-2 in the division. So that's not great. They were my Super Bowl team for the AFC, and in fact, I think I picked them to win it. So that's not looking good.
I picked them to lose to the Niners in the Super Bowl.
Well, that's just because you're a homer, but it's fine.
and the Ravens barely beat the Bengals, 27-24. So
yeah, I can't remember who they beat up on in week 1. That was a convincing win, but that's who it was. Yeah, Texans. So that's not really an impressive win.
No.
But yeah, they barely beat the Bengals. I think they beat them by 3, if I remember right. So
yeah.
Steelers and Browns are currently sitting at 1-1. Obviously, the Steelers just played last night. They played the Browns and ended up winning that game. But I would say, short of the defense, it was not a very good showing by the Steelers. And I'll have some more notes from Kyle. Obviously, he's not on right now, but he gave me a couple thoughts to when we go over each of our teams. I'll read his thoughts on where they are. In fact, Raiders and Steelers play this week, so we'll have to break that game down a little bit too. But yeah, I think the Bengals are probably my number 1 surprise team, just because all that momentum they had coming off of last season, and then you had Joe Burrow getting that contract that I never thought the owner of the Bengals would ever give out. In fact, I was almost thinking that they might let Joe Burrow walk because that owner is such a tightwad that I thought he might let the franchise quarterback get away. But anyway, all that momentum, and yeah, like I said, you lose 2 in the division right off the bat, and your star quarterback has the calf injury lingering from before the season started. That might be one of those situations where now you're looking at maybe best case is a wild card spot, and it's really hard to recover from a 2-game deficit in the division, especially if the Ravens are going to run away with it like it looks like they might to start the season, but I guess we'll see. Anything else in those 3 that you wanted to talk about before we move on to the South?
No, not really.
Okay. All right, so AFC South, we have a 3-way tie at the top for Jaguars, Colts, Titans. They're all 1-1, and then you have the Texans sitting at 0-2. Jaguars obviously just lost to the Chiefs, so that wasn't a surprising loss, so to speak. But they did beat the Colts at the beginning of the season, so technically they sit at the top with that one division win. I think that's where we expect them to be and remain throughout the rest of the season. Is that still your feeling about the Jaguars after seeing them through the first few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, well, like the whole South, like, 500, give or take a game. So
yeah, I think that's kind of what we're all expecting. I mean, I picked the Jags, I think, as the number 2 seed in my pick'ems, just because I feel like they're going to beat up on the division. But the Colts have actually impressed me with what they've shown so far, especially without Jonathan Taylor. But obviously, Anthony Richardson, he went out in the first quarter with a concussion. So we'll see how quick he recovers from that. But luckily, they do have Gardner Minshew as a backup. So he's definitely a serviceable quarterback in this league, and he's been there before. Probably not going to be a sustainable starter for you for the length of the season, but he definitely is capable of stepping in and backing up and playing as needed. So the Titans, I think, are actually going to be one of those teams that I picked them to be right around 500 and be the second place in this division, just because I felt the Colts and the Texans were so bad. So I think I might even pick the Titans as like the last seed in the playoffs. I can't remember. We never ended up posting those, so we'll have to go back in and maybe just, since we haven't talked about it, just post our preseason picks, just so we have them on record. But yeah, I think the Titans will be right up there towards the middle. Colts wouldn't surprise me now seeing them play a couple games if they're towards the middle as well. And the Texans, even though they've lost, and like you said, they've got one of the worst differentials, I think that they should be very impressed with what they've seen from C.J. Stroud so far. I mean, I think he's third overall for rookie in passing yards and touchdowns through 2 games, if I remember right. I know he is for sure in
I haven't
passing.
been paying attention, so.
Oh man, he's been a stud. I mean, obviously they don't have a ton around him, but he looks like he's the real deal. In fact, I would say between him and Richardson, they look like the best rookie quarterbacks thus far. So, and we'll talk about some, especially if Logue jumps on. We'll talk about some that haven't looked so good. But anyway, so yeah, I think that division's kind of shaping up how I expected, other than the Colts have kind of surprised me, which my Uncle Gary is a Colts fan, so I'm sure he'll be happy if Anthony Richardson ends up being what it looks like he could end up being. And I would even say he's ahead of schedule based on what they've gotten out of him in these first 2 games. So
yeah, I mean, even with Minshew, like, he's got some Fitzmagic qualities to him, so he should hold him over till he gets back.
It's funny because that's exactly who I was thinking he reminded me of in terms of his ability to come in and back up and play well for a couple games. But if you try to play him for an entire season, it doesn't go well. He does just well enough for you to question if he should be the starter until you start him, and then you're like, oh yeah, no, he's not a starter. Okay, so let's move on to the NFC now. You got the NFC East, which this is one of those divisions that's actually shaping up to look pretty tough. Again, you've got Cowboys, Eagles, and Commanders are all sitting at 2-0, which really surprises me. And then the Giants at 1-1. And quite honestly, the Giants have been one of the most disappointing teams in the league. They just squeaked out a 3-point win over the Cardinals after giving up, I think it was a 21-0 lead in the first half. And then they ended up coming back and winning. I think it was 31-28.
Yeah, so that's what I'm looking at right now. So
epic collapse by the Cardinals in that game. And Giants, I mean, if they could play like they did the second half for an entire game, I think that they would be right where I picked them in that second in this division. But it's been very inconsistent. And in fact, they didn't have a touchdown through, I think it was 5.5 quarters to start the season. So not a great start for them. And there's already people, questioning if Dabble was a one-hit wonder. And then Saquon, you got him out with an injury.
I think it was 6 quarters because I'm just looking at it. Like, they scored in the 3rd quarter against the Cardinals.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and it was 6 quarters to start the season. So that obviously not a great start. Darren Waller, this should make Raiders fans feel better about trading him. The hamstring issue that he had with the Raiders that kept him out, I think it was 15 games in the past 2 seasons he was with the Raiders. It's already crept back up with him on the Giants, and they said it's a nerve issue, not the muscle issue. So that's going to linger probably for the entirety of his career. So for them to get a 3rd-round pick out of trading him, it's starting to look a lot better than it did when we initially saw that trade. So obviously you hope he recovers, but anytime you have nerve issues in a specific body part, it doesn't usually just go away on its own. So we'll see how he does with that. Cowboys defense looks great, but I don't feel like they've really had any. I mean, they played the Giants the first game, and the Giants kind of just waved the white flag after the first half, and then they played a Zach Wilson-led New York Jets offense, which is, I mean, if you look at what they did last year, it was historically bad. So I don't know that you should cash those Cowboy Super Bowl tickets just yet, Cowboys fans. But
let them get hyped up.
Yeah, I mean it's a yearly cycle, right? Right now they beat up on. I think they're at the step where they beat up on weaker opponents, and they all are coming out of the woodwork saying "We damn boys," and then the playoffs come around, and the cycle starts again. So, Commanders have been a huge surprise to me. Eagles, no surprise. I think we all picked them to repeat in this division. So, but it is good to see the commies getting some fan engagement back, and all the former players, now that Dan Snyder has left, seem to be re-engaged as well. So good stuff there. Anything else in that division you have?
I mean, as far as the Commanders go, I was kind of thinking that they would pull something together. So
they have a good defense, and then Terry McLaurin's a great weapon. I mean, they have some weapons on offense. It's always just been quarterback. And Sam Howell, I guess we'll see. Right now, he's playing actually pretty good ball, and he had a couple very impressive throws against the Broncos in that second half. So, I mean, maybe they found their answer at quarterback. They've been searching for a long time, so I guess we'll see. Seemed like they, finally found their answer with Alex Smith, and then he had that horrific injury. So.
Yeah, like Nick Chubb just had. So.
Oof, yeah, that was ugly. Probably should have talked about that with Browns, but we'll get to it. We've got a whole list of notable injuries that have happened thus far, and I mean, we're just barely going to be touching on them because there's been so many, and some are obviously season-ending, some are just a couple weeks, like Saquon I just mentioned. He's only projected to miss maybe 2 to 3 weeks. They're still saying they haven't ruled him out for this upcoming week, but I find it hard to believe that they would put him back in after just a few days. So, all right, let's move on to your division. So we have the NFC West. This one has been very puzzling to me, but I'll have you start. How are you feeling about your 49ers?
Well, I mean, the defense out of the gate was pretty slow against the Rams. I kind of figured they would be ready for it, considering what they did in Seattle.
Yeah.
But I mean, it took us till the second half, and then towards the end, we got a couple of turnovers that helped us out. So that was a little worrisome. And then, everybody's talking about Purdy's overthrowing, but I'll take some overthrows over a lot of panic dump passes that I've seen in some of the other games.
I thought you were going to say then Jimmy's underthrows, which saw a couple of those last week.
I wanted to watch the game. I missed it. And I was...
Yeah. I mean, he had, I can't remember who it was that was running wide open, and had he just thrown it the 50 yards it would have been a walk-away touchdown to the end zone, but he underthrew it, threw it 40 yards and ended up getting, it wasn't intercepted, but it got knocked down. I think it was to Trey Tucker, if I remember right. So I have to go back and watch that game because I was very frustrated. Basically, after the first drive, it was just very bad. But no, your 49ers have definitely impressed me. Against the Rams, it's so hard to pick those division games because I mean you see them twice a year. They know most of your players. They know most of what you want to do, so they're usually closer than you expect them to be. I had the Rams as I think the second worst team in the league, or in the national
In the NFC?
conference NFC. There you go. Um, and they've actually surprised the hell out of me so far. Like Sean McVay is obviously a great coach, and I didn't think he would come back because of how bad this team was going to be. He was contemplating retirement and all that, but Stafford looks healthy.
Yeah, I expected him to be a little rusty, but he
Looks great.
came out swinging. So
Well, and Cup's out, so I thought for sure they were going to struggle, especially at the start of the season between Stafford and Cup. And I mean, they got that Puka Nakua from BYU that's got like the most receptions through 2 games for a rookie in a long time. And then Tutu Atwell's been doing pretty well. You got Van Jefferson. So they have some weapons on offense. And in fact, they already said today that they were shopping Cam Akers because he's basically been taken out of the rotation. So
yeah, I saw that like a healthy scratch or something.
yeah, which they had issues with him last year where he had attitude problems or whatever. So they just benched him and tried to reach a trade. No one really wanted him. The weird thing that I saw was the Raiders were one of the teams that inquired about potentially trading for Cam Akers. So that could be a little curveball because we've seen nothing from our backups. But getting back to your Niners, the
maybe
best
the
thing
Browns will trade for him.
they could, but it sounds like they might just bring back Kareem Hunt. He was visiting with them today, and then they had that rookie that
Ford
came in the game. Yeah, Ford. He looked
he had
pretty
like
well.
a 70-yard run or something. I saw that.
Yeah, I don't think he's quite the Nick Chubb. He's not going to be the heavy load carrier, but he is that change of pace back that's got the speed. If he can get to the edge, he can break those 70-yarders. So he looks okay. But no, your 49ers, I thought it was very impressive what they did against the Rams when they didn't necessarily have their best. They still put up, 30 points? I think they beat them 30-23. Is that right?
Yeah, because of that last second field goal for no reason.
Hey, no, there's a reason. McVay wanted that backdoor cover, so.
Good thing I'm not a gambling person.
Yeah, that would be a pretty tough beat right there. But no, Seahawks, I mean, they look great on offense. Defense hasn't been quite what it was last year. I think they're going to be very dependent on the turnover. So I think they're going to be able to put up as many points as they want, essentially, on the offensive side of the football. And then they're going to be dependent on getting some turnovers to get the ball back in their offense's hand and get their defense off the field, at least in the early part of the season. Usually you'll have the defense pick up towards the second half of the season, especially with the amount of rookies and second-year players they have on it. So I wouldn't write Seahawks off by any means, but the Rams definitely surprised me. And then the Cardinals blowing that epic lead that they had in the second half against the Giants was less than impressive. And
I mean, the fact that they had that kind of lead was a little impressive.
Yeah, but I mean, your coach is a defensive-minded coach, and you don't want to see those kind of leads blown. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like they're very undermanned on that team, so it's hard to hold it against them. But the way that the Giants were playing through the first 6 quarters of the season, you just thought that was one of those wins that the Cardinals was going to get, one of the few. Okay, let's move on to the NFC North. You have Packers and Lions at 1-1, and then the Vikings and the Bears at 0-2. Let me hear your thoughts first. Go ahead. Any of those teams you want to hit first?
Well, I mean, like I said, the Vikings were going to get lucky this year. And Fields is not a good quarterback. So that's expected. I've got a few Bears friends. I see their Facebook posts. They are mad. One of them was like trying to start a GoFundMe to go pay off Fields and get rid of him, and
Oh
and
man.
then the Packers and the Lions, like, you know, there's still a lot of question marks with them, and I don't think either one of us expected them to have, 14-3 or nothing like that. I think we were both like 10 to 12 wins maybe for the Lions. So they're kind of, where we thought they would be.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I've been pretty impressed with what the Packers have been able to do on offense with, their new quarterback in Jordan Love. Obviously, this is kind of like his rookie season because it's the first one he's starting, but he's been in the league for, I think, 3 years now, backing up Aaron Rodgers. So I think he's probably picked up a lot. We just didn't know what to expect since we hadn't seen him in more than, I think he played 2 games last year. Lions, I think, will still be at the top of the division. And like you said, the Vikings, they were 11-0 last year in one-score games, and this season they're already 0-2 in one-score games. So that seems their luck is reversing. And then the Bears, yeah, they've been atrocious. I think they have the second worst point differential other than the Giants in the entire NFL. So I don't know what's going on with that team. I feel like it's the change in coordinator. Not that Nagy was good at all, but I feel like it's another season for Fields to learn another offense. I wouldn't write him off yet. A lot of the things that he excels at, they haven't even been doing. Like, I think they've only run a couple designed runs for him. He's really been told to make the passes in the pocket and not scramble a ton, and that's not his game. He can definitely throw the football. I'm not saying he can't, but if you want him to just sit back there and be a pocket passer, that's not his strengths. That's not playing to his strengths. And then you have guys going out there like Chase Claypool.
I mean, that's hardly one of my favorites.
Yes. So if Chase Claypool's going out there and basically just giving the absolute minimum to not get cut, which I feel like that's probably where this is heading towards. Any teams out there that are potentially looking at acquiring a Steelers wide receiver that the Steelers are willing to get rid of, don't do it. Don't do it. They know their receivers. They know who's good. If they're willing to get rid of a wide receiver, you don't want them. Let's see. AB, Chase Claypool. There was another one that the Raiders traded for that his name's slipping me right now. He's currently playing in like the XFL because he was so bad.
I was thinking about Juju.
Yeah, Juju.
Who is on the Patriots now.
Yeah, he's on his third team. He did all right for the Chiefs last year, but I mean, if the Steelers are willing to get rid of a wide receiver, it's because they're either past their prime, they're losing their mind, or they aren't a good effort player. So anyway, Bears are learning that they probably shouldn't have made that trade. I don't know. I mean, let's not forget last year they were 3-14. So it's not like this is a good team that Justin Fields has to play with. They didn't add a ton. So I don't know. I feel like it's too early to give up on him, but I can definitely see the Bears fans' frustrations.
Yeah, I mean, there's hardly any what is this his second or third year in now, right?
Second, I believe.
Yeah, so hardly any second-year quarterbacks sit in the pocket. They're all still scramblers. Like that they just got to grow out of it.
But I don't know if you should necessarily say grow out of it, because that's where the NFL is going to right now. Like your Brock Purdy's, your Jimmy G's, those quarterbacks are the exceptions these days. The ones that are just going to sit in the pocket and make throws where players are open.
injury wise. You don't want to scramble a lot. Like
That's the
it's nice to
downside.
have it.
Yeah.
It's nice to have that ability, but like a lot of newer quarterbacks, it's like a 60-40 for them scrambling.
I guess this is Fields' third season. So
I don't think
he
he's
got drafted.
starting his first year though, right?
He played in a few games. I don't think he started right off the bat, but yeah. So this is his second full season. I don't know. Like I said, I would pump the brakes on
You got to
saying
find
we
a
need to get rid
balance.
of him. Yeah. There's definitely. I mean, you see what Josh Allen does. He's still one of the top running threats in the Bills' entire offense. Granted, Cook was able to run for like 140 yards or something stupid against the Raiders because they decided they just didn't want to play that game. So he didn't have to do that. But ideally, you don't want your quarterback to be, a run-first quarterback because it doesn't usually end up working very well long-term with their health. I mean, we've seen that with Lamar Jackson and Greg Roman. That's why I'm so excited to see what he does with someone that's better suited to take advantage of his strengths and allow him to pass the ball a little bit more with his new coordinator in Monken. So that's what I think Fields, and that's the frustrating thing for a lot of these quarterbacks that get drafted so high, and kind of what Caleb Williams, his dad, alluded to. It sucks because you're going to the worst team and you don't really have a choice. So the only choice is either go back to college or come out and try to make the team better. But a lot of the times it's not the ideal situation to be in. So, I mean, we could see Fields moved on from after this season if the things don't turn around, and I don't know how they really will because I don't feel like they added a ton on that offense other than his name's escaping me, from the Panthers, the DJ Turner. They traded for him this past offseason to get him a true number one. That's not the right name. It can't be. Let's see. Bears wide receiver. If Flo goes on, he'd tell me right now because, that was his favorite receiver on the Panthers. DJ Moore. There we go. I had the DJ right. Wrong last name. So outside of that, I mean, you got rid of David Montgomery, the running back. Don't have much to throw to. Don't have a great offensive line. So it's going to be a tough situation there for Fields and the Bears. All right, let's move on to the South, which is one of the most confusing divisions in football for me. It's crazy because you have 3 2-0 teams, and we were saying that this is the weakest division in football, which I still think it is. I think there's a obviously very small sample size here. You got the Falcons currently sitting at the top of the division at 2-0. I picked that. I hope it stays that way. You got the Saints at 2-0 as well, and then you have the Bucks, another team that I said was going to be the worst team in football, sitting at 2-0. And then the Panthers, who I think I picked second in this division, they're currently sitting at 0-2, and their rookie quarterback is really struggling. So I'll have some notes here from Logue, hopefully, here shortly that I'll go over when we talk about our teams. But any surprises there for you?
So I mean, like, I never thought Baker was the problem in Cleveland. So I'm a little surprised that they've, gotten like 2 wins right now, but I didn't expect them to be any like that close to the bottom. Like,
Yeah.
I was expecting like 500 or so. And then I thought New Orleans was going to do good, even though, as a part-time Bucks fan, I'm supposed to hate them. And then,
well,
yeah,
to be fair, the Saints have a 4-point differential in 2 wins, so they've won 2 two one-score games.
It's close, but like I always lately been discounting the Falcons, the Dirty Birds, until like all these articles I see, talking about all the good guys they got. So I had to look into it. So so I guess they're where they're supposed to be according to everybody else.
That's where I picked them. I think they have just a really dynamic offense. The only question mark you really have is the quarterback and Desmond Ridder. But Arthur, their quarterback, no, sorry, their head coach, he's very impressed with him. Says he's their guy. So, I mean, if he thinks he can make him work, plus they missed Cordero Patterson in the last game. They call him the Joker because he plays so many roles, very similar to your Debo or Christian McCaffrey. They kind of just put him wherever on the field. And he's going to be a huge asset to that on top of the, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. You got Bijan just making absolutely ridiculous runs. So I think they're going to be a good team all throughout the season.
I feel like the Falcons as like an organization is probably one of the, I guess, I feel like unremarkable is not the right word, or like maybe quiet. Like if I was trying to list off all 32 teams, I'll be like, I'd probably get to the Falcons last just because I forget about them. Like more people know about the Cardinals because it's a poop show.
Yes.
And like there's just, oh, that's right, the Falcons are an NFL team. Yeah,
it seems like they haven't had much street cred since Vic left the team for the whole dogfighting stuff.
And that blowout Super Bowl come from behind thing.
28-3, not pretty.
Yeah.
That was with your head coach as the offensive coordinator.
He wasn't the head coach. Hey, he wasn't telling the defense to let Brady score all those points. So
no, but he was like, "Hey, let's do drop back passes when we're up 20, when all we need to do is run out the clock." And then Ryan gets sacked, strip sack, taken to the house. They could have kneeled and it would have been more effective than what he called. But anyway, no, Bucks have definitely surprised me. They have an aging defense. They lost their center, I believe. I can't remember if he was center or guard. Yeah, Jensen. I think he was the center. The guy that played through that injury and then ended up probably ending his career early. So they've lost basically everyone from that core other than Mike Evans and Godfrey's still there, I believe.
They're not re-signing.
Or
so
Godwin.
He's probably going to be on a trade block or something.
I bet they'll keep him if they are staying competitive. And, really, that division, I think, to stay competitive, all you're going to need to do is be around 500. So Derek Carr and the Saints have looked pretty bad on offense. Luckily, that defense is, still pretty good with an aging core. I did see that they just extended Cam Jordan another 2 years. But, you can tell how much they believe in Carr in the fact that they brought Taysom Hill on to ice the game against the Panthers that have looked atrocious. And the Panthers aren't getting any help. They just lost Shaq Thompson for the season, most likely. So that's going to be a rough hole to dig out of for the Panthers, especially since those two losses have been in the division, one to the Saints and one to the Falcons. So
I think
unfortunately for Logue, I think we're issue. What was that?
I think morale is going to be an issue for them.
Yeah, I think they'll be a much better team next year if the quarterback can take the next step. But Bryce looks like a child out there, and I don't know how you get around that. He can put on some weight, sure, but he's not going to grow. It's a tough look. I don't know. we'll see what they. I think the defense has all the pieces that they need. The only problem is Brian Burns has been holding in essentially. I think he played in the first 2 games, but I don't think he's been practicing much. And he wants a new contract similar to Nick Bosa's that just got signed. I don't think he's going to get anywhere near that, but might be a decent trade piece where they can bring in some extra assets because they're not ready to compete just yet if they were to trade him. And I just so happen to know a team that could use some help at pass rush, which maybe we'll just go right into that. Are there any other things you want to talk about in standings?
No, I think we covered it pretty well.
Okay. So we'll go into our team specifically and how we're feeling about them through the first 2 weeks. Raiders, I mean, they just got manhandled on both sides of the football by the Bills. Obviously, they beat the Broncos in Denver, so that's a really good win to start the season. And like I said, going into the game against the Bills, I knew they were going to get the Bills' best shot because they lost to a Zach Wilson-led Jets. And, everyone has basically been talking about how awful Josh Allen is since about halfway through last year. So I knew we were going to get his best shot. I think he ended up going like 34 for 37 passing the football, 3 touchdowns, 275 yards. I think he also had about 40 rushing. So just a really impressive performance from him. Corralled his gunslinger mentality a little bit and took the throws that were in front of him rather than trying to force those deep shots to Stephon Diggs. And I really don't think the Raiders were able to counter that because they were expecting him to take those shots. They basically played zone all game and tried to keep the ball in front of them. Tried to not let anyone go behind them. Pass rush wasn't getting home. Other than Max Crosby, I mean, no one even really sniffed getting close to Josh Allen in the pocket. He rolled out a couple times, and we had a couple. I think we had 2 sacks on the game, but those were not necessarily they didn't come from our front 4. I think other than Max, he had a tipped ball on a Josh Allen pass that ended up getting intercepted, but there was a penalty, of course, because every time we've had a turnover this season, we've had a penalty that's negated it. But anyway, other than that one push from Max Crosby, I don't think we really even got to the quarterback other than those 2. We had basically 2 linebackers that came through untouched. They just didn't block them. So it's just having one more person rushing than they had blocking. But Tyree Wilson looks like he's moving in quicksand. I mean, he's not getting off the ball at the snap. I mean, Brian Baldy, he does those breakdowns of all his favorite players, and then he does, some players that need to work on some things. He's highlighted Tyree Wilson 2 weeks in a row for how bad he is at rushing the passer. And I know we weren't counting on him to have to do this so quick. He's coming off the season-ending surgery in college. He didn't get much of a training camp. In fact, he got cleared, I think, the week before the season started. So he had a very, very quick get ready. Chandler Jones has been missing, which I'll go into that in just a second. But I mean, Tyree Wilson has been a major letdown, but I don't think it's his fault. Like you said, he didn't get much training camp, didn't get any practice in, so they kind of just threw him into the fire to see what he can do. Malcolm Kuntz has been able to get to the passer, but he's terrible in the run game. So it's almost like pick your poison. Do you want someone that doesn't contribute at all? But I mean, if he gets his licks in now, maybe he gets exponentially better towards the end of the season. Or do you want to put Kuntz in there and then they can just run at him all day? So a lot of things going on with the Raiders. They need to improve that pass rush. They need to get someone in the middle of that defensive line that can, actually move the opposing offensive line. Because right now they have, I think, 4 of the worst rated defensive linemen in all of football, according to PFF, and they're rotating those guys in. So other than Max, it's basically just a bunch of guys that you could probably pick anyone off the street and they'll do better at this point. So I don't know who's out there free agent wise or any trades that could be available. I know who I'd like to see them pick up is actually on the Bills, and he actually got delegated to a backup pass rusher this year on the defensive line. His name's slipping me, so I'm looking him up right now. I really need to have this stuff written down so I don't have to look it up every time, but, let's see. Jordan Phillips from the Bills. I think he would be a major addition. He's just a hefty guy in the middle of the defensive line that can push centers, guards back into the quarterback and generate that rush. If you have that, it makes Max Crosby's job a lot easier. It makes Tyree Wilson's job a lot easier. So they need to get some help there. And part of the reason they can't just go out and get some help is because Chandler Jones. I don't know if you've been following that situation at all, but let's just say I don't know what's going on with Chandler Jones, but he is posting some whack shit on Instagram and Twitter and then claiming his account's been hacked. But then later that day, or I guess just earlier that day, his account has been posting videos of himself like that same day. So like, I think he's going through a mental health crisis. Obviously, I'm not someone that can evaluate that or whatever, but based on what I see from what he's posting and who he's interacting with on Twitter, Instagram, these people are, they messaged him 2 years ago based on these shared conversations that he's sharing, and he's replying to them now 2 years later, like LeBron James.
Maybe he's letting Antonio Brown check out his page or something.
He did say that he was on Antonio Brown's side against the Raiders earlier in this whole tirade. Then he accused Mark Davis of molesting his goddaughter or something. Like, this guy has gone off the deep end with whatever he's accusing people of. And like, he shared a video of himself flexing in the mirror 2 days ago. And like, he looks like he's probably down to like 200 pounds maybe. And he's a defensive end that's supposed to be playing at, like 265 or so. So it looks like he's lost about 60 pounds.
I'm on my vacationing and traveling to Wyoming, I'm up to 223.
Yeah. I mean, he's a lot taller than you, but oof. Like, can you imagine?
That's even worse.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'm 5'9" and 223. If he's 6-something and 200.
Yeah, I think he's 6'3", and he looks like he's probably about 200. So he's not going to get any pass rush. And that's the thing. At this point, it's frustrating to me that the Raiders won't like put him on, the exempt list or whatever.
Or like PUP or something, or
yeah, non-football related, whatever. Because right now he's carrying a roster spot, so we can't bring someone in to replace him. And obviously, you could probably start to explore the conduct detrimental to the team, but I don't think they want to explore that route yet because they want to help him. And if they cut him, he no longer has access to the resources. But right now I can't imagine Mark Davis, Dave Ziegler, Josh McDaniels are too impressed with seeing this stuff out there being, sent out in the public scene rather than being taken care of behind the scenes. So I feel like that situation has to come to a head this week. I don't know what's going on, but anyway, that's just some of the problems we have on the defense. We also have our defensive coordinator was told that he has to go up to the booth instead of being on the sideline so he can see the game better. Obviously, things aren't going well on the defensive side of the football, so that may be signaling that there might be a change coming sooner than later on the defensive coordinator position for the Raiders. So I don't know. Right now, we're definitely a mess, on the verge of becoming a complete disaster already 2 games into the season, even though we're currently sitting at the top of the division. I think this game coming up between the Raiders and the Steelers will have a huge impact on where we go the rest of the season. So Sunday night football game at home against your, rivals from the 70s, probably the most bitter rivals outside of the division. So I don't know. We'll see. I'll talk about Kyle Steelers after you go with your 49ers.
I kind of talked about them already when we were talking about the divisions. Like the little slow defense in the beginning. And then I guess, Ayuk's like shoulder collar injury, but from what I heard and read, it's not serious. Like it could have been like I think something with this clavicle, but it's not broken. It's more of a see how it goes, how he feels situation. But we have plenty of other people to pick up the slack. So like Debo, Ayuk got hurt, so he didn't play as much during the game. Debo got a lot more little halfback passes and such, and then you got like Quan Jennings. He's always ready to go. So even if Ayuk has to take a smaller role, especially since we're playing Thursday against the Giants, we should be okay.
Yeah. Is that a game that that quick turnaround you worried about at all? I mean, obviously the Giants have not looked great other than that second half against the Cardinals.
Well, we're not the Cardinals, so I'm kind of wondering if the Niners may have been underestimating the Rams, even though they had a great game against the Seahawks. Maybe they're not like, oh, it's the Seahawks. It's a one-off. But now, obviously, the Rams are not a one-off. So, I guess we probably helped everybody's eyes open towards the Rams, so they're going to take it more seriously. So, we had to take that beating a little bit. But yeah, the way the Giants have been, and I think hopefully the Rams game kind of woke everybody up to take everything more serious and not take all the hype that everybody's, a lot of people are saying, they're already counting us in for like being in the Super Bowl and stuff and like all that stuff. So we need to get humbled a little bit. So, the Rams did that a little bit, and hopefully they just, keep that in mind going forward.
Like I already said, I think Saquon's going to miss that game, so that's probably their top offensive weapon. I mean, I don't know how you guys do at containing quarterback runs, but that would be my main concern with the Giants is Daniel Jones is actually quite mobile. But
that's, Russell Wilson, when he was with the Seahawks, we could just never contain him. So, Hargrave was doing good and stuff, and as now Bosa is back and knocking the dust off and stuff, and I feel like our defense is going to be a little bit more together, even though it's a short turnaround. So,
yeah. I guess those Thursday nights are the only thing that really scare me because I was thinking about taking you guys in Eliminator this week, but then I was like, yeah, Thursday night games are tough.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for reminding me. I got to do all that stuff. I'm in so many like pick'ems and things. It's crazy.
Okay, so let's go to the Steelers. I just got a quick note from Kyle. Just because obviously he's not on, so I asked him for quick thoughts on the Steelers, and then I said who you got in the Steelers versus Raiders for this weekend. And he said, "Thank God for the defense. Without them, we'd probably be, 0-2." Canada is still Canada. Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator, definitely a lot of calls for him to be fired. I think they even had a chant there in Pittsburgh saying "Fire Canada." The last, or were they in Cleveland? No, they were in Pittsburgh last night.
Yeah, I think they were in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so there was a "Fire Canada" chant. I think it was in the fourth quarter.
I feel like
so.
the Steelers fans are missing out on a good opportunity for a Blame Canada from South Park.
There you go. And then he said Pickett doesn't look comfortable yet this season, but he is going to pick the Steelers versus the Raiders on Sunday Night Football, and he said it would be a field goal or less. I think last I saw the spread was Steelers -1, so I mean it's essentially a pick 'em at that point. But I don't know. I don't know what to think with the Raiders. I feel like they're going to come out a little more inspired than what we saw from them against the Bills, especially since it's the home opener for the Raiders. But I also know the home opener for the Raiders is probably going to be half Steelers fans because, that's what Vegas is. Bunch of traveling fans, and you have all the season ticket holders that are trying to make some of their money back. So they're selling those tickets to the highest bidder, and it's usually the visiting team that's coming in for a weekend trip to Vegas. So I don't know. I really have a hard time picking this game just because our offense really hasn't done much. I mean, especially Josh Jacobs. He had -2 rushing yards against the Bills. And not all of that is his fault. He was getting hit 4 yards as soon as he got handed the ball. I mean, he was already getting hit 4 yards in the backfield. So I think he had 9 carries, -2 yards. They bring in Zeus, the backup for the garbage time, and he had 2 nice runs and then fumbled the football, turned it over. So I think that's why they're looking at Cam Akers, is they don't trust their running back room other than Josh Jacobs. And I really think him missing all of training camp and all of the practices leading up to the season are the reason they're not necessarily on the same page. But that interior offensive line is just getting pushed back. So with the defensive line that the Steelers have, I have a hard time thinking that the Raiders are going to turn it around in this one. But the Steelers offense is also struggling very mightily. So I think it's probably going to be a real low-scoring game. Like whoever gets to 17 probably wins. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be like a 17-14 game. And right now I have more faith in the Raiders offense, but I mean, the Steelers defense can score like we saw against the Browns, forced 4 turnovers and had 2 defensive touchdowns. So
yeah. And I only saw a little bit of that Steelers game, but Watt, he definitely showed up.
Watt and Highsmith both were, constantly just harassing Deshaun Watson. So that's why I think I'm probably going to pick the Steelers and say they win 17-14 with 1 defensive touchdown and probably 400 sacks.
Oh, man. Poor Jimmy.
Yeah. It's not going to be a pretty game. So, and then obviously Logue just texted me and said he's obviously not joining this evening, so I'll just give a quick thoughts on his Panthers. I know he's not feeling inspired about the quarterback choice that they made in Bryce Young. It's super early in the season, so he's definitely not saying, season's over. He was definitely hopeful that they would pick C.J. Stroud, and through 2 games, it looks like Stroud probably would have been the better option. But Bryce Young, he was the same size as he is now in college and had a very successful college season. So I think he has the tools. I just don't think the Panthers have the offensive weaponry around him to make him successful, especially on offensive line. So I think they're going to have to make some investments on the offensive side of the football. And like I said, they may end up trading Brian Burns to get some more assets because at this point they're not quite ready to compete. And the defense is playing well enough to keep them in games. But, if you're losing to the Saints with the offensive performance that they put up, that's not telling you that it's going to be a good season. So, plus, like I said, they lost Shaq Thompson probably for the year, which is one of their better defensive players and probably the leader in that clubhouse on the defensive side of the football. So I don't think this season is going to be a very good season for the Panthers, and it pains me to say that. I know Logue's not excited because he feels like had they kept Wilkes around, they'd probably be 2-0, and they probably would have made the Stroud decision versus the Bryce Young. But we obviously don't know that. It's just how Logue feels about it, and I can't say that I disagree that had they kept Wilkes around, I feel like they would have had a better team. Reich is an offensive mind, and they have no offense, so I don't know how well that speaks to him. But anyway, we'll move on from them. Just a couple quick notable injuries from around the league. Obviously, we already mentioned Nick Chubb at the top. He had a brutal injury, so we're definitely praying for him for a recovery. I don't know that football is probably going to be in his mind for the near future. I mean, he had a very similar injury back in college when he was playing for Georgia and came back and became one of the better running backs in all the NFL. But, I mean, that was, 8 years ago now. So how his body recovers, I mean, they already announced that he's out for the season. Who knows if he'll ever play football again. So really just praying for recovery for him, and hopefully he gets full use of his leg again. And maybe if he can return to football, that would be a good thing, but I don't know that that's necessarily what he needs to be worried about right now in his recovery process. So Aaron Rodgers was obviously a huge injury right at the beginning of the season. I think it was on the 4th snap he took for the Jets. He didn't announce that he will be fighting to come back, and he didn't even rule out coming back potentially towards the end of the season. The guy that he got surgery from is Dr. Neil Trache or Tachi, I don't remember how you say his last name, but he's the one that revolutionized the Tommy John surgery with the brace that has the quicker recovery time. I think he did surgery on Brock Purdy, didn't he?
I don't recall who the doctor was.
I'm pretty sure it was him. So
I mean, I think Brock went to like Texas or something. So if he's based in Texas, then maybe. But
yeah. So anyway, Rodgers said, I mean, typically you have Achilles injuries. It's like a 9-month recovery, 9 to 12-month recovery where, he's not going to be running and cutting or anything like that. I think he could probably recover a little bit sooner than that, where he's just, I mean, you're still dropping back. You're still putting a lot of weight on that foot to push off. But I don't think it will be as long a recovery, but he is also 39. So I guess we'll see how his body recovers, and maybe he comes back towards the end of the season for a playoff push if the Jets are there. I'm sure if they're out of the playoff race by that point, they won't rush it and just look towards building for next year. But then you have Cooper Kupp. He's had a lingering issue, I believe it was with his knee. He's on IR to start the season, but they said he should probably be back by that week 4 when he can be designated to return. But we'll obviously keep a close eye on that because I feel like his involvement in that Rams offense is going to dictate how far they can go. And then Saquon Barkley, we already kind of mentioned, he's week to week. They said potentially up to 3 weeks for that ankle injury. Any others? I mean, we talked about Shaq Thompson. Any others you can think of right off the top of your head?
There's a bunch, but I can't think of their name. Like, there's some like defensive stars and stuff, or like
running backs.
Crazy.
Yeah, running backs have been hit. I have 3 running backs on my fantasy football team. No, I have 4. We have a 4-position limit. I have 1 on IR, so I'm technically have 5 on my roster, and 4 of those 5 missed last week with injuries. So running back position has been hit pretty hard. Anyway, we won't get into all of those, and then like I said, the NFL season award predictions, we'll get those posted just so we have record of them, and then we picked our playoff scenarios and all that fun stuff. I don't know that Kyle ever sent me his, but I'm sure he's got them written down somewhere. And then I just want to touch real quick on MLB playoffs because they're coming up soon. And then Shohei Ohtani just had his Tommy John surgery. His agent announced that he'll be ready by the start of the 2024 season for hitting and then 2025 season for pitching. So I think that's obviously going to affect his impending free agent contract. He didn't get much of a send-off from the Angels. Essentially, he cleaned out his locker, I think it was Sunday night, and they didn't do any special announcement or anything. Monday morning, they basically just said he's being put on the IL to have surgery and he'll miss the rest of the year. That's likely the last time we'll see Shohei Ohtani in an Angels uniform. So I thought that they would do, some kind of thank you, but nothing. So I don't know what that does for his free agent contract. Like I said, I think it'll probably shorten the length of the contract for sure. And the dollar sign is still going to be astronomical because, just the opportunity to potentially add a all-star on both sides of the baseball is once in a lifetime type of deal. But where he's not going to be pitching until 2025 at the soonest, I don't know what teams are going to be willing to do. So we'll probably dig into that as that becomes more of a reality in the off season for baseball. But you have some thoughts on that?
I mean, he's still a great hitter, and teams are willing to pay a lot for a good hitter. So, and then you wait an extra year, and then you'll have a great pitcher too. So,
yeah. Well, the numbers we were throwing around in our contract estimations were I think I said $75 million a year. I don't think he's going to get that for his first season. So obviously they can do some things where they say this is what you're going to make this year, and then next year, assuming you're able to do both, we'll do an escalator in that to bring it up closer to what you're worth or whatever. So it's just going to probably be a lot more clauses in there for health or whatever, especially since this is his second Tommy John surgery, and the list of guys that have come back from a second Tommy John and excelled is very small. I mean, you have your Justin Verlanders, trying to think any others that actually excelled after coming back. I mean, the list is very short, so I'm sure it's giving some owners some hesitancy before handing out a major contract like they would expect for prior to him getting that second Tommy John. So, but like I said, playoffs is coming up. The races are shaping up very interestingly. In the AL West, it's separated by 1.5 games between the Astros, Mariners, and Rangers, and obviously that's as of the start of the night because some of those teams are still playing. So we'll see how it ends up.
I mean, Orioles just won, and they clinched something or another, and
yeah, I probably clinched the division. Well, no, it can't be the division because you guys are only a couple games behind them. So
I think 2.5 right now or something. But
they probably clinched a playoff spot, is what they clinched. So they're guaranteed to make the playoffs now. But yeah, like you alluded to, East is separated by 2 games, just between the O's and the Rays at the start of standings tonight. I don't know if you guys have finished your game. If the O's have clinched playoff, they must have finished theirs.
No, yeah, Rays beat the Angels. So
cool. So yeah, still 2 games apart, I guess. And then you have for the wild card in the AL, you have Jays, Mariners, and Rangers all separated by 1 game for that second wild card spot.
Isn't it 3?
Last I saw, it was only 1, and that was earlier today.
No, I meant there's 3. There's East, Central, West each get 1, and then there's 3 wild card spots, right?
Oh, yes, you're right. So yes, between the Blue Jays, it's actually 1.5 now. Blue Jays have a 1.5 game lead over the second or that third wild card spot that is currently held by the Mariners. Rangers are tied with the Mariners for that third spot, and then the Yankees are clear 6.5 games back. So I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but you can always have a crazy run right at the end. We've seen crazier things. So, and then National League side, you have the Braves, Dodgers, and Brewers that have pretty much run away with their divisions. So the NL wild card is actually pretty crazy because Phillies, Diamondbacks, Cubs, Marlins, Reds, and Giants are all separated by like 5 games total. So you got
Or like
really,
even if you just ignore the Phillies, and then you got the last 2 spots
last
where
2
there's
spots
like
you've got them separated by 2.5 games. So it's insane.
yeah.
And Padres, I mean, they're
about to beat the Rockies. Like it's supposed to be like a no-hitter right now. So,
not out of it yet. I mean, as bad as they've played, they're still in the conversation just because of how close the wild card race is. And like you said, they're about to win. That'll be their 6th in a row. They just had a very interesting article come out from The Athletic talking about their disarray in that organization because of the GM and the disconnect with Bob Melvin, the current manager. I know a lot of people are throwing blame at Bob Melvin for the situation that's going on in San Diego, but I mean, the guy is 3-time manager of the year. I don't think he's the problem, where AJ Preller has basically ran off every single manager he's had and hasn't had much success there, despite having one of the highest payrolls in all of baseball. So there's some rumors saying that Melvin might get fired at the end of the year, when really I think they need to be looking at the front office. But the owner of the team, Peter Seidler, I think his name is, he just loves AJ Preller. So, I mean, I think other than Preller essentially wasting $275 million of his this year, I don't know what else it would take for them to fire Preller before Bob Melvin, but I don't think Melvin is the problem in this situation, just based on, having him as manager for the past, I think he was with the A's for the past since 2012, might even been 11, 10, somewhere in there. He's with the A's forever and absolutely loved him as manager. I think he outperformed almost every season. So I don't know, man. I feel like in 1 year he didn't just lose his ability to manage, where you have a GM with proven track record of not having success. So anyway, fun stuff going on in MLB. Can't wait for the playoffs to start. Obviously, I won't be paying as close attention as I would if the A's were in it, and they have been eliminated, I don't know, probably 30 games ago. But I still do love me some MLB baseball, especially in the playoffs. So I'll be tuning in and pulling for your Rays. I pretty much love the Braves because they're the A's East at this point, with all the guys that we let go to the Braves. So anyway, anything you had to add before we call it?
So in minor news, so there's a Pioneer League, which is a developmental league in baseball. The Billings Mustangs just lost to the Ogden Raptors, like in the Pioneer League World Series. So,
dang it!
Yeah. Oh well.
Makes me sad that the Utah team won.
I don't think there's a Wyoming team. It's like Montana, Idaho, and like Utah, and maybe Colorado's got a couple.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any Wyoming teams in it.
Probably not. I mean, Wyoming did have the Casper. I think they were the Ghosts, honestly. I think they were the Casper Ghosts back when I lived there. But, I mean, there's been so many minor league teams that have lost, or so many cities that have lost their minor league teams with the realignment in baseball. So I don't know that they still have it. But we got to play on that field for state every year in Casper, and it was very nice field to play at. So anyway, all right. So we will call it a pod there. Like I said at the top, make sure you guys follow us, share us if you can. We put these clips out. Obviously, we're on all podcast platforms. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitch, Twitter, X. and Facebook. So anywhere you guys can see us, please follow, please share, and we would appreciate it. We do like you guys tuning in and getting those comments in. So we will catch you on the next one, hopefully this weekend, talking about the upcoming games other than the ones we've already talked about. We will catch you on the next one. See ya.